Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and I'm sitting down today to do one last promotional video for my upcoming course, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. I'm going to take a look at two different birth charts today. Actually, one is a birth chart and one is a horary chart, just to give you a sample of some of the things that you'll be learning if you decide to sign up for my class. Also, I do these videos because I know there's a lot of people out there just self-studying, and I think it's always helpful to do a little birth chart demonstration. So I try to throw one in every week or every other week or something like that. So hopefully you'll find these interesting. My new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, starts on Sunday. You can learn more about it on my website, nightlightastrology.com, or you can email if you have any questions, info@nightlightastrology.com. It's a one-year course with 30 classes plus 12 guest lectures. And in those 30 classes, about 2 to 3 hours each week, we have live webinars on Sundays from noon to about 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. You can participate remotely. All the classes are recorded. All the materials that you need are in a Dropbox. We have a classroom forum. We go through all of the foundational elements of Hellenistic astrology, and then at the end of the class, the last 10 lessons or so, we bring in live clients, which I read for, and then after the live client leaves our classroom, we break down the session and talk about how to read charts and how to work with people using these ancient methods. So it's a really great class. It's especially good for people who are either brand new to astrology, kind of just starting off in astrology, or people who've been studying for a long time but have never studied ancient classical astrology, which tends to be more predictive in nature. So however, the class is definitely about trying to fuse or synthesize elements of ancient classical astrology with modern psychological astrology. So you will find that there's a good blend of both. So maybe some of you will sign up. The early bird rate is still in effect until Sunday. You can save $500 off. There's a payment plan if you need it. And then we have need-based tuition for anyone who's hurting financially, especially because of COVID-19. We try to make our class, all of my classes are really accessible that way. We try not to turn anybody down. So just reach out if you need any help with that. All right. So all that being said, can't believe the class is already starting. Feels like it was just the other day I started advertising for it and promoting it. All right, so first I'm going to show you a birth chart. And in this chart, I'm going to just show you a few of the basic examples, a few basic techniques, and how they turned out in this particular reading. Then I'm going to show you a horary chart that I did as well. So what I liked about this reading, and the reason that I picked it, is that there's just a few really good examples from this chart. This is a chart I did a very long time ago. And you just observe a couple of things about the chart right away. One is you may notice that there is a stellium here in the 12th house. Now, oftentimes people, when approaching a chart, when they want to look for what a person is going to do for a living, or what their career or occupation might be, we're always told, hey, look at the 10th house, go up here, look at the 10th house, look at its ruler, look at the midheaven, look at its ruler, and so forth. And that can be one very accurate way of ascertaining what a person might do for a living. But actually, there are many ways of trying to understand what a person might be occupied with throughout their life. And one of the things you always have to pay close attention to is stelliums of planets, especially stelliums of planets that surround the sect light. In the daytime, that will be the sun. In the nighttime, that will be the moon. In this case, you can see the sun has just risen when this individual was born, and there is a stellium in the 12th house. What you'll notice is that included in that stellium is the midheaven ruler, or also the whole sign 10th house ruler, Mercury. Got a Mercury-Saturn conjunction with the sun all together in the 12th house. So I started thinking, this person probably does something 12th house like for a living. Now, it's possible that other peripheral topics could come up, such as, the sun may represent one's father, in which case maybe we could tell a story about the sun in the 12th house regarding this person's father. But the overall thing that I wanted to get right to was this life path. The sun often tells us about the narrative arc of a lifetime is taking place in the 12th house with Mercury and Saturn. So it turns out that this person works in something like, we'll call it neurochemistry, and they work in a hospital setting where the research of drugs and psychiatric medication is a huge part of what they do for a living. So I think, and we'll leave it at that as the description. because they actually do something very specific, and I don't want to get into that so much. But it involves a very 12th house-like setting, a hospital, psychiatric institution in particular, and it involves highly analytical, disciplined, scientific knowledge, which is very Mercury Saturn, and this is a big part of their life path. So this is a case where it's not just Mercury, the midheaven ruler or the 10th place ruler, that's telling you what they do for a living, though Mercury in Scorpio in the 12th house is pretty good for some kind of, neurochemistry research. That sounds fairly accurate, especially considering that this is part of the treatment of mental health problems. But it's the combination of Mercury, Saturn, and the Sun all together that just shine a light on that area and say, look, you're going to spend a lot of time in this arena of life, this 12th house dimension of life. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The other thing that was one thing that stood out from this reading, and it's a simple lesson, which is stelliums involving the sect light, the sun in the daytime, the moon in the nighttime, or sometimes stelliums in general, will point to what a person is preoccupied with in their life. And so any house that it's in, even if it has nothing to do with the 10th house, pay attention to those, because they will, where there's a lot of planets, there's oftentimes a lot of focus in a person's life. So simple lesson about stelliums. Now, something else that is interesting about this chart is, of course, that this person also has Jupiter in its detriment, in Virgo, opposite to its own house of Pisces, the 4th house of home, family, and roots. And remember, Jupiter in Virgo is in Mercury sign, and Mercury is in the 12th. So this person had to make a decision, and I had talked about something like this when reading for them, that this person had to make a decision to leave the home that they lived in and to essentially pursue their education against the grain of what was common for women in their family. Now, how can you see that from this basic placement? Because one thing that happens when a planet is in the sign opposite to its own, which is said to be its detriment, is that you'll often see some element of the signification involving being outcast or an outsider, or having to leave a place that's familiar or something like that. So this person's career began when they decided to leave home and pursue an education that was not considered to be so great for women like that. And this was something I said, one of the ways that I typically frame something like that is there any way in which your career path, in this case, Jupiter in the 10th house, came at the cost of your family or your home, or having to leave home or something like that? And this person also expressed, some regret at also, being torn throughout their adult life between child rearing and their own career, which is pretty common, right? So this is also about, family life later on, as the person, went beyond their education, started their own family, and so forth. They also, interestingly, there's a few other things in here that I want to mention. Sorry, I'm just losing my place here. Here we go. So also you can see that Mars is in Libra in the 11th house. And that's also a planet that's in its detriment. And this person experienced several difficult upheavals in their life that completely upended their social life, in particular their relationship with friends, colleagues, and social circles, due to conflict that was happening in their love life. And you can see this as a part of the potential signature of Mars in its detriment in the house of friends and groups and this greater social world that we occupy in Venus's sign. So that was a big part of their story as well. And then one other interesting thing was that this individual's spouse, you look at the 7th house of love and relationships, and you see that it is also Mercury ruled. Mercury is in the 12th. And so, interestingly enough, this person specialized in, sort of the mental health field, research and understanding of brain chemistry and things like that in the health field. This individual's spouse also suffered from mental health problems that were quite serious. So you see the ruler of the 7th in the 12th. So these are all things that you're able to see by virtue of looking at house rulers and where they are relative to the topics that they rule. And this is one of the basic ways that we play the ancient astrology game. It's not just that each planet represents a part of your psychology. It's also that each planet tells you something about the life and an objective description of the fate related to any area of life. So you always are looking at planets in houses to qualify that house, like Mars in the 11th, or the planets that we looked at in the 12th, but you're also looking at the ruler of a place. So when we look at the south node of the moon in the 7th house, that can have an impact on the 7th house. And I won't go into that right now, but if there's nothing else there, then you especially want to pay attention to the ruler. Always pay attention to the ruler, but then look at the ruler's position. The ruler of marriage is in the 12th house, which is a place of loss, and it's a place of hospitals and sometimes self-destructiveness. And this is someone who had a partner who had mental health problems and even a nervous breakdown at one point. So now, some fearless forecasting. When you look at a chart like this, there's a couple different ways of making basic predictions. One is that it's very helpful in ancient astrology to narrow it down to the traditional 7 when you're practicing, which is something we do in all of my classes. For a whole year, you get to learn just with the traditional 7. Before, if you go into my year 2 program, we add back in the outer planets. It's a really amazing thing that will sharpen your practice more than most people can imagine. We tend to lean really heavily on the outer planets in modern astrology. Learning with just the traditional 7 and the ways in which the old, different sophisticated ways in which they were used really ups your game. Anyway, so fearless forecasting, right? Let's just take a look. Well, the big thing that's happening one of the things that's happening in this person's chart, and this person recently, we did like a follow-up, is that Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter in the 2nd house, all opposing Mars in the 11th house. Or squaring, excuse me. And there's a range of topics that can come up when something like that happens. So you could be connecting the transiting planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto in Capricorn in the 2nd house to the topics of money and finances, somehow affecting Mars in the house of friends, groups, or organizations. Well, needless to say, there's been some drama in the organization that they work for due to COVID-19. That's been challenging. That's also had an impact on their finances, as you can imagine. But the other thing that's really interesting is notice that Mars is also the ruler of the 5th house, which is the place of children and pregnancy. And right as Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter came through, one of their children also became unexpectedly pregnant in guess that would have been sometime during the winter. So right around the time that we had all of those planets passing through a square to the ruler of the 5th house of pregnancy and children. Sometimes it's literally just activating the ruler of a topic that will make the topic appear in the person's life. All of these things are very easily predicted. Okay, so I shouldn't say that when I sit down with someone, I will just go, "You're going to get pregnant." But we can say, around this time, here are the topics that might come up very strongly. And one of them will be your children or the topic of pregnancy. And so, when you add that to a short list of maybe 4 or 5 other themes, and you give a person a month within which to really watch for these things, it's very accurate, obviously. So now, the other transit, of course, that's happening, just about to happen, is you've got Neptune squaring Venus and eclipses coming into the 1st and the 7th. So buckle up for relationship activity, right? This is partly a halfway nodal return, and then Neptune squaring Venus and eclipse is about to come into the 7th and the 1st. So right now, this person may very well, they're not at the moment, but they very probably in the next, let's say year, as the eclipses come through, are going to be dealing with significant changes either to their health, or something happening in the life of a partner or partnership. So these are very, very basic techniques, and knowing how to prioritize which techniques to use at which times, how to make simple topical readings of a person's karma. These are these are the kinds of techniques that we visit in my class, but hopefully you just pick up also, if you can't take my class or if you don't have the time for it or whatever the case might be, that you pick something up from these little demos and that they're helpful for you as you're developing your own skills. Okay, so I'm going to go on to a horary chart. This one is a fun example of a very simple concept in horary. Native is saying, what will become of my company? And their company is going to be represented by the 10th house ruler, which is Jupiter, and they are going to be represented by the first house ruler, which is Saturn, as well as the moon. So basically, what will become of my company and my relationship to the company? And one of the simplest things that we can do in horary is look and see, well, what's going to happen to the company? So do we see anything that's going to happen to the company? Yeah, Jupiter at late Sagittarius is about to enter Capricorn, where what happens? It goes into its fall. Now, this was back in November of 2019. I said, it looks to me as though maybe, and you can draw it out. How many degrees does it have to go? About 3.5 degrees, 4 degrees or so. I project that to be, say, weeks, months, or years, and then there's a way of narrowing that down to whether it seems like a short, medium, or long amount of time within the degrees that you've chosen. So in this case, 3.5 units of time will go months, so what do we have? December, January, February, March. So about March, the company something may come up that would be really difficult. Or sometimes you don't have to use the timing. You can just say, yeah, it looks like the company's about to take some kind of major nosedive, or, it's going to fall on hard times somehow because the planet representing the company is about to enter its fall. But what is the dignity exchange with our querent? How does that affect our querent? That's the question. And the querent is the person asking the question. They're represented by Saturn, the ascendant ruler, and the moon. Well, as soon as Jupiter goes into Capricorn, obviously it's in the detriment of the moon, but then it's in the rulership of Saturn. So the forecast that I made was, it looks as though the company itself is going to take some kind of hard hit, or there's going to be some challenging times that hard times that fall upon the company, something like that. But these changes will probably be in your favor somehow, because just as Jupiter changes signs, again, it goes into its fall, so the company falls on hard times, but as it does so, Jupiter is then in the rulership of our querent, who is Saturn. So that was my forecast, that this is what will happen. The company will fall on hard times, but it will end up benefiting you. So sure enough, COVID came around, and the company had to lay off a bunch of people and obviously took a serious nosedive. But in the process, my querent was offered a promotion, because what they do is vital in some way to the company. And so actually the COVID-19 nosedive ended up greatly benefiting this particular individual. So that's a really simple, clean, beautiful example of horary, and how just a simple look at what's going to happen to a planet and how it changes the receptions with another planet can give you a very specific answer to a very specific question. Horary is very magical in this regard. So I hope this was interesting to you, these two demonstrations. They give you some things to think about. Horary obviously takes a lot longer to learn. There's a lot more methods involved. If you know your aspects, your house meanings, your essential dignities already, then you are probably ready to dive into the horary class. That horary class starts this weekend as well. You can check that out on my website, nightlightastrology.com. Hopefully, though, again, the purpose is always, like, I do these for two reasons: to help promote the upcoming course, and also for people who can't afford it or don't have the time or whatever, who are more self-taught, to just give you some demos of different basic techniques that can help really hopefully improve your ability to read charts. So thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you are having a very awesome week, and I look forward to have a lot of new content coming out soon, and lots more transits to come, another eclipse this month, lots of things to look forward to. So have a nice rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.